about a story?
Knuckle!
I'm going to send this out to Mark Lynn. It's been a great tour. We've been out for about 2 weeks. We started out in Birmingham, Alabama, opening for Alabama Shakes and Had a Blast, with my dad playing with us. And then we went up to Franklin, Tennessee, then to Newport, Kentucky, where we had a really, really fantastic night at the new improved Southgate House. Then we went to Chicago and Ann Arbor, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, where we really had a great time at the Beachland Ballroom. Then we worked our way up to Ithaca, New York. We had a private party out on Long Island that was really cool, and then we played Pete Seeger's Clearwater Festival. I got to hear Pete Seeger do a song. He's 94 years old and rather spry for 94. And I got to see a great set by Chris Christopherson. Catch him while you can. Son Volt and Jason Isbell. And then we drove down to New York and had a day off and ate some really good Italian food and hung out with some dear friends. And then last night we were in Annapolis, and that was really cool. And here we are tonight, the last night of the tour. We're going to start heading back after the show. But I'm going to take you back in time to 1997 when things weren't nearly so sweet out here. We'd never toured before. The Truckers were a brand new band, and we had nothing out but a 45 and a t-shirt. The 45 was bulldozers and dirt and 9 bullets. And that was back before everybody was buying vinyl. We were ahead of the curve, literally. But we hit the road nonetheless with our good friends, the Starroom Boys, another band from Athens that was really kick-ass, and we shared a pedal steel player with them. And their drummer couldn't go, so they borrowed our drummer, and we didn't have a van that would make the trip. At that time, all our touring was in a 1978 Plymouth Voyager that was named by about 3 bands before us that owned it, the Huffer. And I've done a lot of stupid shit in my life, but I've never been dumb enough to take a 2,000-mile journey in something called the Huffer. Nonetheless, the Starroom Boys, they had a van. They had an almost new Dodge with First Baptist Church painted down the side. I take it from a previous owner, and they were convinced that would make them cop-proof. But I wasn't so sure. Nonetheless, we put as much gear and as many people in that van, and we headed north for our first ever tour. And we couldn't fit everybody. We were about 4 people short of being able to fit in that thing. And so we looked around to see who had a car that could make the trip. And the closest thing we could come up with was Cooley's wife's 3-year-old Mazda Protege. And at that time, the Cooleys were living up in Durham, North Carolina. And so I hitched a ride up there to hook up with them. And Cooley had done the math. The show was going to start. The first tour show was going to be in Columbus, Ohio. And Cooley had done the math. He had figured out that we could make Durham, North Carolina to Columbus, Ohio in exactly 6 hours. The punchline of that joke is Cooley did the math. He's a great driver, but he's no mathematician, that Mike Cooley. And about 6 hours into that journey, we were hauling ass somewhere on the West Virginia Turnpike and realizing how fucked and late we were. And that's when it started pouring down rain. The hardest rain I've ever seen in my fucking life. It's just raining cats and dogs and frogs, and it's all hellfire fury of rain. And these 18-wheelers were zooming past us in the left lane, and every time one would do that, that little Mazda Protege would hydroplane just enough to where your asshole would be like this. And I'm sitting in the back seat terrified. Our bass player at that time was 6'8", and he was sitting in the front with his knees up against his chin. And I'm sitting in the back with my knees up against my chin, and I figured out how to work a pen out somewhere, and I wrote this verse. 80 miles an hour in the West Virginia rain. They're waiting in Columbus and we're later than you think. Cooley's at the wheel, Adam's at the brake, and I'm jammed in the backseat with my head between my knees. Jammed in the backseat with my head between my knees. Jammed in the backseat with my head between my knees. Shakes, jitters, bad coffee, cigarettes, and you couldn't drive a nail up my ass with a sledgehammer. Knuckle, West Virginia. Mountain roads and rain. But we made Columbus, Ohio just in the nick of time to throw all our gear directly on the stage and proceed to rock. And we rocked our asses off for the 15, 16, 17 people who paid to come see us. And then we crawled off the stage exhausted, and our host for the evening was a band from Columbus, Ohio that was nice enough to invite us to play with them and to put us up for the night. They were a band called the Lily Bandits. They were a fantastic band from that era from Columbus, Ohio. But when we got backstage, they were all laid out on couches and chairs, puking into garbage pails. Seems one of them's kid had come home with one of them kindergarten diseases, and they were all had it. And they were all sick as shit. And of course, that's where we were spending the night that night. And we ended up at their house, and we slept the best we could on various floors and sleeping bags. And the next day, we hauled ass to Chicago. And that's when the rain turned to snow. And I'm from Alabama. I'd never seen snow like this. I couldn't even comprehend the kind of fucking snow they were getting. I'm thinking, okay, tomorrow we drive to Lansing, Michigan. It shouldn't be too terrible. But the snow, it kept falling on that frozen Great Lake, and it would collect there, and then the wind would pick it up and drop it on top of the ice that was the interstate we were driving on, and we were slipping and sliding in that motherfucking Mazda Protege, and I was terrified. And we got to Lansing, Michigan, and there were 10 feet of fucking snow on the ground. And like I said, I'm from Alabama. I've never seen motherfucking snow like that. But I knew one thing: when it snows, nobody comes out to the rock show. I know a lot of things, but I don't know Michigan people at that time. That place was fucking packed. That's what they do up there. It snows, and they go out, and they raise hell, and they get drunk, and they drive on them. We had a great night in Lansing, Michigan, and I woke up the next morning with the kindergarten disease. Just in time to drive from Lansing, Michigan to Buffalo, New York. And as the crow flies, that's not too very far. But the crow ain't carrying drugs, and we were, so we couldn't cross the Canadian border. So we headed south and then back up. And by the time we hit Cleveland, that snow became a full-scale blizzard, and they started closing the interstate all around us. But we weren't stopping because we didn't have nowhere to stay, and we didn't have no money for a motherfucking hotel. So we kept on driving. And about 3 hours later, I'm terrified and I'm puking in a bag and I'm in the back seat of that goddamn Mazda Protege and I found a pen and a piece of paper and I wrote this second verse. 20 miles an hour in a Pennsylvania blizzard. It don't take a wizard to figure this out. North in the summer, south in the winter. Buffalo December, what kind of dumbass shit is that?